This is the Math 7 Plus video for perfect squares. I haven't had a video in a long time, so I'll remind you to make sure to copy down everything that I write. You should have the perfect squares worksheet that says guided notes on the top left that I gave you in class. If you don't have that, write it in your composition or on a sheet of paper. So first, let's find out what a perfect square is. A perfect square is a whole number multiplied by itself. So if we looked at an example, 2 squared is 2 times 2, which gives us 4. So 4 would be a perfect square because you can break it down to the root of 2 times 2. Now we have a list of the first 15 perfect squares. These are something that you need to know. So if you need to make flashcards, make a chart in your composition, whatever you need to do so that you know that these 15 perfect squares right off the bat. So the perfect square 1, if you square root that, you get 1. Perfect square 4, the square root is 2. 9, the square root is 3. 16, the square root is 4. 25, the square root is 5. 36, the square root is 6. 49, the square root is 7. 64, our square root is 8. 81, our square root is 9. 100, our square root is 10. Our square root of 121 is 11. 144, the square root is 12. 169 is 13. 196, our square root is 14. And for 225, our square root is 15. So these 15 perfect squares you need to know and what their square root is. Alright, so can we find a square root of a non-perfect square? We can find a square root. So what you're going to do is approximate. So you take, if you have the number 65, like we have in our example here, you take the two perfect squares that are above and below 65. So we have 64 and 81. You're going to take their square root, which is 8 and 9. And so knowing that it's between those two, you know that it's going to be on the number line between 8 and 9. And if you went and typed into your calculator the square root of 65, you would find it's 8 and some decimal on after. Alright, so let's look at some more. So if we had 12 and we wanted to know the square root, that's between 9 and 16. So the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 16 is 4. So therefore, the square root of 12 would be between 3 and 4 on our number line. For the square root of 38, it would be between the square root of 36 and 49. The square root of 36 is 6. The square root of 49 is 7. So the square root of 38 would sit in between 6 and 7 on our number line. So we have 4 more examples here. Let's look at one that has a negative next to it. So the square root of negative 29, our square root of below 29 would be 25. And our square root above would be 36. And these need negative signs out in front. So our integers would be negative 5 and negative 6 is what the square root of negative 29 would sit in between. So I want you to try the square root of 75, 130, and negative square root of 57 on your own. Alright, so our instructions for estimating the square root that's not a perfect square, you're going to use the perfect square smaller and larger. So you have to use two, smaller and larger, than that number. And then you're going to find the square root of both of those. And your square root of your non-perfect square is in between. So if we take the example, we want to find the square root of 51. Our square root below would be 49. And our square root above would be 64. So then that means that the square root of 51 sits on the number line between 7, because that's the square root of 49, and 8. All right, so the last 3 questions on our page are asking you if the estimations they give you are a good guess or a good estimation for that square root. Read through them, do the work yourself, and say if you agree or not, or in what would be a better guess if they're wrong. So once you've done this, your sheet should be completely filled in. You should have all the answers written down, everything that was on this video, and get it checked tomorrow for credit on homework.